Hello and welcome to my workshop. So today we're going to be doing a build that's going to be pretty fun and interesting. It's going to be a rat rod build. And it's going to start out with a 1950s Ford cab over engine, or a COE. Alright, so let's get started. So as most of these vacuum form builds, the first part, getting started, is getting the substructure figured out. I went back and forth a couple times as far as where I wanted that substructure to land, but in the end it's pretty close to what I came up with here. The first part is to cut out the MDF wood, and then you can start shaping it from that. So I'm just getting the profile cut down now. So this is the back wall of the cab over, and so I'm just rounding over the corners and getting a little bit of profile from side to side and top to bottom. It's pretty much flat, but it's not exactly 100% flat, so it's just kind of a couple little subtle curves and dimensions there. So taking a Dremel tool and trying to define the area where the window will go. So instead of just cutting this out completely, I decided to go ahead and just Dremel down around the area where the window would be cut out later, and to just kind of save some time that way. There's like a raised, almost like belted portion around the lower part of the cab. So adding on a piece of half round styrene to simulate that. And you can see here where I'm taking the Dremel tool and cleaning up that cut. And so what I end up doing, you'll see the discoloration, and that's from a thin CA glue. I just use that to kind of harden up that area, and I can come back and do some final carving. So you get just a little bit of a standoff to meet the back wall against that inner structure. Okay, so I've got a pretty good start to this cab over build. As you can see, I've got the rear complete. Now just a little bit of detail put in here, and you know, kind of got the general shape with the window and everything. I still have to come around here and get the sides, and then get that, you know, eventually glued in together. But you know, pretty good start. All of this goes on this inner structure here, which allows it to maintain, you know, squareness and, you know, relative shape, but also gives it a lot of strength and rigidity. So once those pieces are glued together and becomes one, it really does become rigid and a really good solid piece. So anyway, continue on with this, and let's just get those doors made. So next up are the doors, and I was able to find these really nice drawings to take some measurements off of. So trying to get the profile to match the drawing, and then also to match side to side, I ended up making this little cardstock template. And you can see there I'm using it to get the dimensions lined up. Then I can turn it around and go to the other side, make sure that it looks the same side to side. So, this belt sander does a really good job of getting the bulk down, and I can do a pretty decent job of getting it shaped, but I really end up having to go to either hand sanding or some other kind of a tool to get the final shape defined. We're just trying to use some of the body lines, mark them up, and get some little offset pieces glued on so that everything lines up just right, and get careful sanding of the edges so they're flat as possible. And I just use some solvent to glue that side piece to the back piece. Start working my way around and forward. Okay, so both the sides are now complete and mounted to the inner structure. I've done a little bit of work cutting out as much as I feel comfortable with of that inner structure right now. As I move forward with the fenders, I'll cut more out. But I'm pretty happy with how this is turning out. It's, it's going together quick, and it's really going to look pretty good, I think, in the end. The next part I'm going to be working on will be the roof. So I'll get the contour, go side to side, front to back. It'll have this little bit of a raised portion here for the to kind of frame in the top of the windshield, and then I'll have to come in and make a piece for the lower part, the cowl, and then that'll give me the frame in for the windshield. All right, so let's get started. So the same process to get the roof done, but the more pieces you get on here, the easier it gets to kind of get these things lined up. And that's why it's really critical to get this first pieces done accurately, because everything hinges off of those, and then one little tiny mistake will then ripple through the entire build. So just taking this Dremel oscillating tool and a little sanding pad on there, and just kind of working those facets and stuff down from where you put it on the belt sander, and it doesn't get quite perfectly round. You can take that oscillating tool and really get that perfectly defined. So even when I do get these original pieces, like the back and the side, done, and then move on to the front, eventually you'll come to the point where you're like, oh wow, I really needed to make that different. And so what I try to do is pay attention to that as I'm going through these builds, and go back and fix the original molds in a way that would make it easier for me if I ever made another one of these. So an example is on the side pieces. I had the top rounded, but it really needed to be just a little bit more rounded than it was, and so I went back and ended up shaving that down later. So after the solvent glue gets a hold of the pieces and kind of bonds them together, I'll come in and fill any small gaps or little valleys with some CA glue, and then I can sand that down, and it dries very quickly, and I can keep moving on, and then come back with like a filler to get like the fine details sanded, filled in. And Okay, so the roof and this hood cowl piece are finished up. I have successfully grafted it to the rest of the panels. There's still quite a bit more fill-in work that needs to happen to get those transitions smooth, but they're getting there. So, you know, just do a little bit here and there, try to get the gross bulk of it done, and then come back at the very end and do the finished details, because inevitably, you know, as you're moving and turning this thing and working on it, it's going to get scratched up. The next thing I need to work on will be the fenders and the hood. Alright, so let's get to that. So I did struggle with this one a little bit, and it was in the front of the cab, as far as the width of the nose piece, the width of the fenders, the look. Just couldn't get really good reference material, you know, that I could find to make me feel comfortable with what I was building. But eventually I played around with the drawing, used some whiteout several times, going back and forth with different lines, and I came up with this the shape for the fenders here. They're just trying to get both those fenders to match up and to be mirror image of each other. Yeah, so getting that front section, that'll eventually be where the opening will go for the grill. So you see, you just cut a channel in there, the plastic wraps in, and then you can have a clear definition of a line to cut. Yeah, the one thing I figured out with that oscillating Dremel tool and the styrene is you really have to be careful, because it doesn't take but a second for that to get the plastic not sanded but hot and start melting. So it's almost easier to do it hand sanding with the styrene than it is with that oscillating tool. As I mentioned, I'm really struggling with the front end of this to get it just right, the way I wanted it to look. I came up with a better solution on how to put this front end together for the next one if I ever build another one. But here I, kind of had to work my way forward with the fenders. And in the future, I think I would actually go and build the front end and then just attach it to the body. And I think you'd have a much better way of getting those fenders lined up. The fenders for the COE are now on, and I have a little piece in the front that kind of connects them together. And I'm not going to lie, these were an absolute pain to put on. I ended up having to put them on, take them off, I think 3 times before I got them just right. The problem is the way this is designed, I should have left this lower piece on, but I really didn't know how much I needed. And so when I cut this wheel well arch out, it only left me with a tiny little piece of material right here to hold this front on, and it just wasn't stable enough, so I ended up just chopping it off because it wasn't doing any good. but then I didn't have a reference point to put the wheel arches, the wheel wells on. But you know, I just kind of went back and forth and started making some measurements and getting some things figured out, and then it finally got it set right. But now it's on there nice and good. And the next step would be to create the part that's going to bridge these two together. So eventually there'll be a hood that'll come down and cover up most of this, but I'll have to come in and get that done before I build the hood off of that. So that'll be the next thing to do, so let's get to that. If you look at this cab over, the way it works is almost the fender is just this massive piece, and it's almost like this hood that comes down on top of it, and it looks like it comes all the way across. And so what I'm doing here is I'm just actually making it just like that. So I just made a piece that bridges from side to side that'll have that front contour, and then I can put that whole piece in, and it ties both fenders together securely. And then I can just take the hood later on and get that sanded and fitted down to that piece. So underneath that tape is that wooden piece, and so I'm trying to get this all done at one time to make sure it's going to work out before I do any vacuum forming. It's kind of built almost a box, really. Very strange looking box, but a box out of MDF, and then just start shaping it to the right dimensions. Probably the main reason I didn't go ahead and make the pull on that piece and went ahead and try to figure out a way to tape that wood in is I'm trying to save space on the vacuum forming table. And so if I just have one piece, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If I don't have anything else to vacuum form, then I need to really do my best to get another piece made so I'm not wasting space on the table. So when you look at this hood, it just looks like it's just kind of just a big lump of hood, and it's not much going on. But really start getting into the details. You see there's a lot to it. So down the center there's a raised portion, but it's not just raised flat down the center. It's actually has a peak in the center. So what I ended up doing was taking a very thin strip of square styrene, glued it straight down the center, and now I'm taking pieces on each side and gluing them to that, half on that square piece of thin square styrene and then onto the wood. And what that does, it gives it an angle down, and so it gives you that contour. And to get it wrapped around the front, I just made like a little relief cut. I can backfill that with CA glue, get that sanded down, and then you end up getting that contour piece of styrene around the front. There's also on the side a little raised portion, and so what I ended up doing was just taking a thinner piece of styrene, gluing it to the side, and then you can see you get that bump out effect. Okay, so the hood and this little fender extension is on. So what I ended up doing was basically filling and detailing this back. Probably not perfect, but pretty close, so that I can when I get the hood on, I didn't have to work around the hood. Now I'm still going to have to come back in and do a lot of details around where the body line is. This piece right here is a little high, so I got to sand that back down and probably fill it from the back side to do that. But all in all, this turned out really nice. So I had this little detail in the front, piece going down the center, and it's actually high right in the center and tapers off both sides. A little small raised portion here, and then there'll be a badge that goes right about there. There'll also be a small badge that goes there, and I'm trying to get some good examples to make those. The next thing I have to do is get this piece here. So what I'm going to end up doing is cut this off right here and open this up and make one piece mold that will fit in here that will have the detail for the grill. And so what that would allow me to do is to build this whole front end in the future and slip it onto the body, which I think will be a lot easier than what I did before. So I think that's what I'll work on next, and let's see if we can get that done. So the last thing we're doing here is getting this grill, and I thought this was going to be one of the most challenging, most difficult parts of this whole build, and it turned out, I wouldn't say it was easy, but it was a lot easier than what I expected. So I'm going to make this grill in two pieces, and so I'm making the back structure now. So I just end up making a piece that is basically the rough shape of the opening, and then I put a thin trim ring around that and sanding that down. And what that'll do is it'll make like a transition piece to go into a recessed area in the back. It's interesting, if you look closely at that recessed area, you'll see there's a line down the center and them fill. What I ended up doing was I found out that it was just a little bit too wide, the whole thing. The contours, the top to bottom, everything was just perfect, but it was just too wide. So instead of remaking the whole thing, I just basically took it over to my table saw, cut it in half, trimmed off a little bit off each side, and then glued the piece back together. Did a little bit of filling to make it, the transitions right, and you end up with that backfill piece, with the correct dimensions now. So this is the part I thought was going to be really challenging, was coming up with that really iconic grill. And I ended up just basically taking pieces of MDF, forming the shape I needed, so like the long piece that goes across the whole way, and those inner pieces, and then just chopping them off at the right dimensions and then reforming them. And like I said, it was pretty quick to do that, and I was really surprised. So this piece I'll get cut out and get sanded down, and that'll get permanently mounted into the body, and then I'll do all the transitions and sanding. The other piece I'm going to end up bolting in, and that'll allow me to do a lot of finish work and get everything painted and set up correctly the way I want, and then bolt it in and out if I need to be. Okay, so I'm at a pretty good stopping point for this Ford COE. There's still a lot more to go. It's going to be a complete build. It's going to be, like as I mentioned before, it's going to be a rat rod, and I still have to build the custom chassis, put all the electronics and everything in it. But I think we got a pretty good start so far, Up front, very proud of this grill. It's a two-piece grill. I've already gone ahead and glued in the back structure, but this inner piece right here actually bolts in from the back and has some lenses in here. I have some pieces on order to get the bucket in the back so that I can put an LED in there, but that shouldn't be too hard to get in there. The rest of it, it's all turned out really nice. I still got to cut in the doors, add in details like the grab handle, and do a lot more finish work. I still got to do an interior as well, but I think for now this is a pretty good stopping point. So a lot more to go on this, a lot of fun things to come, a lot of cool, interesting projects coming up. Until then, we'll see you in the rocks.